All right, guys, so we are going to be talking about factoring when a is greater than 1. And we use factoring, you've been factoring by grouping, when we have quadratic trinomials in standard form. So we talked about quadratics, remember they're always raised to the second power, and then a trinomial meaning that it has 3 terms. So one thing that I want to point out is that C is your constant. It will always be a number with no variable. All right, so I'm going to just jump into an example. Make sure that you pay attention. We have an A term, all right. Oh, kind of got a little blurry. A B term and a C term. Oh, these amazing highlighters don't show up as well on this picture. So we'll start with an example so you can just see kind of how it works. All right, I am going to take the quadratic trinomial 2x squared plus 11x plus 5, and I'm going to start factoring it. So one thing that I am going to write over here, just so you guys know, is that my A term is 2, right? My B term is 11, and my C term is 5. Just so you guys know what I'm talking about when I say A, B, and C. So A, B, and C. All right, the step 1 is look for a GCF. That's the first thing that you want to do. And if there's something that you can divide out of all 3 terms, then do it. This one does not have a GCF, so we don't need to multiply, or we don't need to divide. Step 2, we're going to multiply our A term and our C term together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to put them in this X. So I'm going to take my A term and my C term, which is technically a 2 times 5, and I would get 10. And I'm going to take that number and put it at the top of my X. So that's technically our step 3. You multiply the A and C term in our third step. Step 3, make an X. And put the product of A and C on the top of the X. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at our B term, our middle brother, right? Middle term that nobody likes him. Because nobody likes him, he's going to move to the bottom. So middle brother, no one likes, goes to the bottom. Okay. So then what we want to do for our fourth step, you'll remember some of the warm-ups we were doing kind of led up to this. Step number 4 is we want to think, hey, what multiplies to 10? But, oh, why did I put 5 on the bottom? Sorry, guys. My middle term is 11. I don't know why I put 5 on the bottom. Oop. And now my whiteout is stuck, and I'm trying to be efficient with this video and not waste too much of your guys' time. All right, so it's 11. I need to think of, hey, what multiplies to 10 and adds to 11? Well, if you've thought of those, it would be 10 and 1. So what I've technically done is I'm going to take this 10 and the 1, all right, these two numbers, and they go on the side of the X. So what I'm now going to do is I'm technically going to split the middle term. So I am going to take these two, this 10 and this 1, and I'm going to rewrite them into the equation. So I'm no longer going to have this 11x because if you notice, 10 and 1, they equal that 11. I've split that middle term. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to now I'll write the original equation so you guys can see what I'm doing. 2x plus 11x plus 5. And now I'm splitting this middle term with these two factors, the 10 and the 1. So you'll notice when I write them, 2x squared plus 10x, notice that I put an x next to it, right? And then I take my 1x plus 5. So I've split the middle term. And now, I don't know if you guys notice, but my step 6, I now have 4 terms, so I'm going to factor by grouping. So I have my 4 terms, and I'm going to go ahead and look at this group and factor out my GCF, and that group and factor out my GCF. And right then and there, you need to make sure that you're looking for your matchy-matchy parentheses like we talked about in our Zoom chat. So if you look over here, we have a 2 that can divide into both of these and an x. So I would go ahead and I would factor out a 2x. I'd be left with an x here, and 2 divided by 10 would be 5, and then the x would just go away, right? Because I've divided it out. I've taken the x away. Then for this next one, gosh, if we don't have anything to factor out, remember we always factor out a 1, and I'm again left with x plus 5. And if you guys look, lo and behold, we have our matchy-matchy parentheses, exactly what we wanted. So we can rewrite the equation. 2x plus 1 in one set of parentheses and x plus 5 in another parentheses. And that, my dear friends, is your answer. If you wanted to test or check your answer, you could simply multiply your two polynomials. All right, I don't want this video to be too long, but I am going to do one more for you because I know one example isn't always enough. So feel free to pause it if you need to jot stuff down. But this next example is going to be example number 2, 12x squared plus 17x plus 6. All right, so first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to multiply my a and my c term, right? So I'm going to take these two and I'm going to multiply them together, just the coefficients, right? The numbers in front. So 12 times 6 is 72. And then I bring that middle brother that nobody likes to the bottom, which is 17. And then I try to think of two numbers that multiply to 72, but when you add them together, equal 17. Well, if you were to think about that, that would be a 9 and an 8. So now I have my terms to split my middle term. So I went ahead and multiplied 12 by 6 to get 72. I took my middle brother, 17, put him at the bottom. Then I thought, hey, what multiplies to get 72 and adds to get 17? Well, 9 times 8 is 72, and 9 plus 8 is 17. So now I'm going to just rewrite the equation, 12x squared, and I'm going to use this split term now, plus 9x plus 8x. Don't forget, I put the x's next to them, plus 6. And I don't need to include that 17 because, look, I broke it apart. I split it. So then I can just factor by grouping. All right, and look and see what can go into both of those. And the biggest number that can would be a 3. And they both have an x. So I'm going to factor out an x, which would be a 3x. Well, 12 divided by 3 is 4. x to the second, and I'm taking 1x away, so it just becomes x. And then plus 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3, and the x minus x would be cancel out. So now I look over here to my next one. Well, they don't both have an x, so I can't factor out an x. And the biggest number they're both divisible by is 2. So I would factor out a 2. So I end up with 4x plus 3. And then I look and see, are my parentheses matchy-matchy? Oops, that was a positive. Yes, they are. So I now can do 3x plus 2 in one set of parentheses and 4x plus 3 in another set of parentheses. And that is your answer. Again, if you don't believe me, you can multiply it together, box method or FOIL, and there you go. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do is example number 3. Same thing, 6x squared minus 13x plus 6. I want to point something out here that I feel is pretty important. I don't know if you guys can see that this is negative, but as soon as you see that your second term is negative, just remember you're going to have to do something. Kind of like what we talked about in our Zoom with when we factored by grouping. So again, I'm going to make my magic x. I'm going to do 6 times 6, which gives me 36, and bring that negative 13 to the bottom, my middle brother that nobody likes. And my two factors that multiply to 36 and add to negative 13 are a negative 9 and a negative 4. So I'm going to go ahead and split this 13 by writing 6x squared minus 9x minus 4x and then plus 6. Remember what I told you before. If the third term is negative, you need to factor out that negative when we start factoring by grouping. So I'm looking at my first 4 terms, and I'm seeing that they're both divisible by 3, and that I can factor out an x because they both have an x. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. X squared and x would just be x. And then I have negative 9 divided by 3 is a negative 3. And the x's would disappear, right? X, and take away that x, it's gone. So now this is the tricky part, that negative, right, of third term. So I'm going to factor out a negative this time. And I see that they both go into 2, and that's it, right? They don't both have an x, so I can't factor out an x. So I end up with a negative 2x minus 3. Whoops, not a negative 2. Sorry, a positive 2 because I divided out a negative 2. And then lo and behold, my parentheses match. And I have 3x minus 2 in one set of parentheses and 2x minus 3 in another. And that is factoring when a is greater than 1. Okay, bye guys.